The wind howled across the empty plains of Wyoming, carrying with it the smell of frozen pine and the echo of a storm brewing in the distance. Under a lone oak tree, a small campfire flickered weakly, its orange light dancing over a worn leather saddle and a pot of beans bubbling softly. Beside it sat Clara May, a cowgirl in her early 20s, with hands cracked from work and eyes as fierce as the prairie she called home. Her horse, Dusty, grazed quietly behind her, steam rising from his nostrils. Clara pulled her old poncho tighter around her shoulders, whispering, "Just one more night, boy. Tomorrow we ride into town. Maybe someone will finally buy that saddle." She'd been living from sunset to sunset, her dreams of owning her late father's ranch fading with each unpaid bill. But still, she smiled at the fire. Hope was a stubborn thing, and Clara had plenty of it. Then came the sound, wheels crunching through frost. A dusty black truck stopped on the nearby trail. Out stepped a man, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a hat that looked far too clean for a cowboy. In his arms was a little girl, bundled in a pink blanket, shivering. "Evening, miss," the man called out, voice deep but soft. "Didn't mean to startle you." My truck's radiator blew a mile back. "Any chance you got some heat to share? My little girl's freezing." Clara looked up, wary at first. Strangers on these roads weren't always kind, but when she saw the little girl's blue lips and trembling hands, her heart melted faster than the snow. "Come on over," she said, scooting aside. "Fire's not much, but it's warm enough for good folks." The man smiled gratefully and knelt beside her, wrapping his daughter closer to the fire. The flames cast golden light across his rugged face, the kind of face that had seen struggle but still carried calm strength. "What's her name?" Clara asked gently. "Annie," he replied, brushing the girl's hair. "She's 6. Toughest kid I know." Annie managed a weak smile. "Your horse is pretty," she whispered. Clara grinned. "That's Dusty. He's prettier when he's not covered in mud." The man chuckled, his eyes warm. "Name's Jack. You out here all alone?" "Been that way a while," Clara said, feeding another stick to the fire. "Ain't got much, but this patch of land keeps me alive." For hours they talked under the blanket of stars, about the land, about lost dreams, about the kind of quiet that only the prairie understands. Jack said he worked around ranches, but never said which ones. Clara didn't pry. When Annie finally fell asleep, Jack looked across the fire and said softly, "You've got a good heart, Clara. Not many would open their fire to a stranger in the dark." She smiled faintly. "My daddy used to say, when you got little, share it anyway. Might be the only light someone sees that night." Jack stared into the flames, his jaw tight, eyes glistening. "Your daddy was a wise man. Morning came with pale sunlight and frost on the grass." Clara woke to find Jack already up, fixing her fire pit neatly and pouring the last of his coffee into her tin cup. "I'll get my truck towed and be out of your hair," he said, lifting Annie into the truck. "But I owe you one, cowgirl." "No debts here," Clara said, smiling. "Just warm fires and kind hearts." Jack hesitated, hand resting on the door. "You ever think about owning a ranch again?" Clara laughed softly. "Every day. But dreams cost more than I've got." He gave a small nod, something thoughtful in his eyes. "Sometimes dreams just need the right partner." Before she could ask what he meant, the engine roared to life. He waved once, then drove off down the dirt road, disappearing into the morning haze. Clara stood there, wind lifting her hair, wondering who that stranger really was. She didn't know that the man she'd shared her fire with, the quiet traveler with a kind smile, was Jack Hartley, owner of the largest cattle empire in the state, and one of the richest men west of the Rockies. And she surely didn't know that her simple kindness had already changed both their lives forever. The next few days drifted by like slow clouds over the prairie. Clara May returned to her small chores, mending fences, patching her tent, and trying to stretch the last of her beans. But her thoughts kept circling back to the stranger and his little girl, the way he'd looked at her fire, like it was more than warmth, like it was something he'd been searching for. 3 days later, while leading Dusty to the nearby creek, Clara spotted a dust trail rising in the distance. A truck, She froze, shielding her eyes from the glare. The same black truck rolled up the hill, stopping right in front of her. The door opened, and out stepped Jack, this time wearing a clean denim coat and a calm smile. Beside him, Annie hopped down, clutching a small box tied with twine. "Morning, Cowgirl," Jack greeted, tipping his hat. Clara's heart lifted. "Didn't think I'd see you again, stranger." "Couldn't stay away," he said with a grin. "You saved us that night. Least I could do is say thanks proper." Annie stepped forward, handing Clara the box. Inside, wrapped in paper, was a new pair of gloves, soft leather, the kind real ranchers wore. Clara blinked back surprise. "These are too fine for me." Jack shook his head. "No, they're just fine for someone who knows what hard work means." He looked around her small camp, his smile fading into thought. "You been living out here since your father passed?" She nodded slowly. "He left the land to me, but the bank took it when I couldn't pay the taxes. I stayed close, though. Feels like he's still here somehow." Jack's jaw tightened, eyes scanning the horizon. "What if you could have it back?" Clara laughed, half bitter, half dreaming. "Unless you got a bag full of gold in that truck, mister, that's just prairie talk." Jack stepped closer, pulling a folded document from his coat pocket. "Maybe not gold, but I might have something better." He handed it to her. It was a deed, her father's ranch deed, her name printed in fresh ink at the bottom. Clara stared, her voice trembling. "What is this?" "It's yours," Jack said softly. "I bought the property from the bank. Figured it belonged with someone who loved it, not someone who just counted its worth." Tears welled in Clara's eyes as the wind whipped around them. "You bought it? For me? Why?" Jack's expression softened, his tone humble. "Because kindness deserves to come full circle. That night by the fire, you gave what little you had without knowing who I was. You didn't see money or power, just a father and his girl who needed warmth. Truth is, I'm Jack Hartley. I own Hartley Cattle Company, up near Red River." Clara's breath caught. She'd heard the name all her life. The man who owned half the cattle in Wyoming, richer than most folks could dream. He nodded. Just a man who'd been too long surrounded by people who wanted something from him, until a poor cowgirl shared her fire and reminded him what real heart looks like. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. The only sound was the wind rustling through the tall grass. Finally she whispered, "I don't know what to say." Jack smiled faintly. "Say you'll take care of this land. Maybe teach Annie to ride someday. She's taken quite a liking to you." Annie tugged Clara's sleeve. "Daddy says you're the bravest lady he ever met. Will you come see our ranch?" Clara knelt down, brushing Annie's hair. "I'd like that very much, sweetheart." Jack extended his hand. "Then saddle up. Got a truck full of tools and a heart full of plans. I'd say it's time this place started living again." Weeks passed, and the once empty fields came back to life. Fences mended, barns repaired, the scent of fresh hay filling the air. Jack visited often, helping her rebuild, not as a billionaire, but as a man rediscovering simplicity. Clara worked harder than ever, and little Annie followed her everywhere, calling her Aunt Clara. One golden evening, as the sun melted over the ridge, Clara stood on her porch now, watching the sky burn orange. Jack walked up behind her, quiet as the dusk. "Place looks alive again," he said softly. Clara smiled. "Feels alive too. Guess all it needed was a little fire and a few kind hearts." Jack looked at her, eyes steady. "You gave me something I couldn't buy, Clara. Peace. Maybe it's time I stop running from the quiet and start living in it." She turned, meeting his gaze. The wind carried the scent of sage and wood smoke between them. "Then stay a while," she said gently. "There's room here for dreamers." Jack chuckled. "Guess I'll follow your lead again, cowgirl." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small charm, a silver horseshoe. "For luck," he said, placing it in her palm. "But something tells me you don't need much of it." As the stars bloomed over the darkening sky, Clara looked at the man who had once been just a stranger by her fire, now the partner she never knew she needed. Sometimes life doesn't give you riches first, it gives you heart and waits to see what you do with it. And Clara May had given hers freely. and in doing so found a love that burned brighter than any fire under the wide Wyoming sky.